trade is back at the top of the news today. The United States and the European Union have reached a new agreement. It will see Europe being hit with a 15% tariff across the board. That is going to be very expensive for European importers into the United States. Remember, about 6 months ago, there was a tariff of maybe 2-3%. Now it is increased by a factor of 5, and it is in fact considered to be a, quote, good deal because of the threats that President Trump had made prior. He had talked about 20, 25, 30%. Canada, of course, is also trying to negotiate a deal with the United States. That deadline is coming up this Friday, August the 1st, to try and cut some kind of a deal. It's possible that that European deal might be a sign of things to come for Canada. Here's more from Mark Carney.
We're engaged in them, but the assurance for Canadian business, for Canadians, is we will only sign a deal that's the right deal, that's a good deal for Canada. We're representing Canada. We're standing up for Canada. The United States and Canada can do many good things together. We have done that in the past. We can do more in the future, but on fair terms for our country.
CTV's Colton Prale is standing by. He's been tracking this story throughout the day here. It's interesting to hear the Prime Minister say that, Colton. I'd like you to help us make sense of what that means when he says we will only sign a deal that is a good deal and a right deal for Canada.
Yeah, looking at the baseline, which Donald Trump today said would be 15 to 20% global tariffs, between that range or one of those two numbers, he changed his answer twice. There's two big takeaways here for Canadian industry in particular. One, yes, there's that baseline tariff, which we still don't know should a deal be reached. Would that have the same sort of free trade agreement exemption that we have at the moment that allows the majority of goods not to actually have to pay those tariffs? But two, the bigger concern for Canadian industry is the fact that we're not seeing sectoral carve-outs. So the Section 232 tariffs, which are different than his global tariffs, which apply to specific sectors like steel, aluminum, autos, lumber, those are not seeing changes in large part. The EU says that they're going to see those steel and aluminum tariffs dropped from the 50% that they're at, but it will require export quotas to be in place, and those export quotas haven't been defined. They haven't been clarified. There's no timeline on when they might be imposed. So at this point in time, even with this deal in place, they're still looking at 50% tariffs on steel and aluminum. There's no carve-outs for the auto sector. That's a pretty big deal in Germany. It's a big deal in Japan as well. It would be a bigger deal for Canada if there was no carve-out for our auto sector because of the risk of offshoring production. It's much harder to move a factory from Germany to the U.S. than it is from Oakville to Michigan. And economists and trade experts that I've spoke to say if Canada can't see those sectoral carve-outs, like other nations have not been able to, our economy would be uniquely exposed in a way that is much more dangerous than it is for those other countries. And so when you hear Mark Carney talking about the right deal, talking about a fair deal, he's placed a lot of focus in recent weeks, including when he met with the premiers recently, on finding those sectoral solutions, less so on a global tariff solution. That's really what you hear him talking about. That is the real concern that exists in industry. We saw Melanie Joly today at a steel plant. The government has talked about the financial assistance it's going to be offering the steel and auto sector. There's calls for more assistance from the lumber sector as well. You know, these are the areas that need help, and that's going to be what's creating some of the challenges in trying to find a deal with the United States. Are we going to find that by August 1st? That part very much up for debate. There's been no insinuation or no hinting towards that from the Prime Minister today. He was asked about the President's comments on Friday when he dismissed negotiations with Canada, saying they weren't really a focus. We heard the Prime Minister respond to that today, essentially saying that those comments are made in the context of a negotiation and not necessarily to take them at face value. We know that the Minister for U.S. Trade was in Washington last week. He's back this week, continuing meetings that sources in his office say were really productive and genuinely encouraging last week. So there are signs that, as Mark Carney put it today, there is a potential landing spot, but it's very unclear what that actually looks like. And there are bigger questions to be asked as well, because on top of these sort of sectoral carve-outs that we aren't seeing, that we know Canada is going to be looking for, what we are seeing is large investment made into the United States in a lot of these deals. Japan creating a $550 billion sovereign fund with the U.S. The EU promising to buy $250 billion worth of energy each year for the rest of Trump's term. These are massive, massive investments in the U.S., and there's a big question as to whether Canadian economy can swallow that kind of investment in the U.S. if that's part of a deal as well. And so, as the Prime Minister put it today, these negotiations are intense, but they're also complex. And he pointed to those different elements of the agreements that are being reached as part of the challenge in coming to an agreement by Friday or sometime in the future, potentially after the U.S. imposes a higher tariff rate.
Colton Prail in Ottawa. Thanks, Colton.